Okay, so I've made some NFL videos before, like one or two, and throughout my time doing this whole YouTube thing, I've covered a ton of teams. And, well, I mean, you see the title. I thought, hey, why not take all this knowledge I've gained doing research and straight up watching football and do a 2010s NFL recap? I think it'd be fun, and with the offseason here, let's just have a good time. Put on our nostalgia goggles and geek out about some football and remember the entirety of the 2010s decade. So let's begin, and let's start with 15 years ago in the mythical year of 2010. The 2010 NFL season. It's wild that some of you watching this video might have not even been born yet, but this season for me was the first NFL season I actually have memory of watching, and of course I enjoyed every waking second of Bruce Grodkowski. I've been suffering for a while. Anyways, in 2010, let me get into some world building here, because coming into this year, the defending Super Bowl champions were the New Orleans Saints, led by Super Bowl MVP Drew Brees, who will be absolutely tortured in this video beyond human description, as you'll find out, but he's going to stick around too. And not far behind the Saints were the Colts, led by Peyton Manning, who I just did a video on, the Green Bay Packers with Aaron Rodgers, and the New England Patriots with Brian Hoyer. And I mean, as you can probably guess, these four Hall of Famers will be the backbone of this entire video, molding the entirety of the 2010s decade around their image. The Pittsburgh Steelers were also a weird team to measure because their quarterback, who was just a tier below the Big Four, Ben Roethlisberger, was suspended for... I'm getting sick of saying it out loud, y'all, so there you go. But without him, the Steelers did fine, and when he came back, they became one of the scariest teams in the league, led by Defensive Player of the Year Troy Polamalu.
Troy Polamalu, okay? Fucking Troy Polamalu.
But the regular season was also pretty damn solid. We're going to have better ones in a few minutes, don't worry. But in Minnesota, things were, well, they weren't great. Brett Favre's horniness got leaked from a few years back, and that didn't exactly help the team morale, as the Vikings went from being a game or just a play away from the Super Bowl. If Favre could just take a knee and try a 56-yard field goal, they might be in the Super Bowl. But in 2010, the Vikings went 6-10, and their unluckiest moment of the year came when their dome collapsed, but sadly, this did not stop the Vikings from playing football that week. Meanwhile, we got some fun one-off moments as well. The Calvin Johnson rule changed how we even view the process of a catch. Andre Johnson kicked the ever-loving shit out of Cortland Finnegan like he was playing Street Fighter. Deshaun Jackson did the thing versus the Giants, and Texans running back Arian Foster also quietly had one of the greatest running back seasons ever. And from a pure fantasy perspective, not only did he peg me in the Final Four, which I'm very over at this point in my mature adult life, but the top 13 players in fantasy points that year were all quarterbacks, except for Arian Foster, who was number 1 with 326 points. But the story of the year, and going into the playoffs, was the New York Jets. Fueled by an underdog mentality, grit, and a passionate foot fetish, nobody wanted to get near this New York team, but this is a contact sport, unfortunately, which led to one of the weirdest single-season playoffs by any team ever. Not only did the Jets beat the 14-win Patriots, but the round earlier, they also beat the Colts, which would turn out to be Peyton's last game as a member of Indianapolis. So all of a sudden, the Jets were in the AFC Championship game, with Mark fucking Glizzard Gobbler Sanchez as the quarterback, and that angry ESPN guy is the head coach. And in the NFC, things were, I guess, a little bit more normal-ish, but only barely. The Seahawks were one of the worst playoff teams of all time, sneaking into the postseason with 7 wins, but after trading for Marshawn Lynch, things changed.
Marshawn Lynch!
Yep, 41 points. Come on now, Drew. You think you can score 36 in the playoffs and expect to win? What a fool. Go back down to your hole and cry. Well, we'll see you in a few minutes for your next beating. But sadly for Seattle, they couldn't keep up their Cinderella run and were promptly eaten by a bigger fish in the Bears, who were then devoured. Devoured by the Green Bay Packers, who, led by Aaron Rodgers, who is a legal owner of this facility, he defeated Not Jay Cutler, because he got hurt and his toughness was questioned at the time. But BJ Raji did this after picking off Caleb Haney. Caleb Haney in the NFC Championship game. It seems like he's a trustworthy financial advisor, though, so if you're in the area, hit him up. Meanwhile, the Jets fell to the Pittsburgh Steelers, which set up the Super Bowl. Packers versus Steelers. Once again, my first Super Bowl having a conscience. And how was this game? It was pretty good. But for a season like 2010, that was kind of like a bridge year into the meat of the 2010s, this was a very solid Super Bowl and a career-defining game for Aaron Rodgers. The Packers kind of blew them out, up 21-3, but Big Ben climbed back in and wasn't going to be denied. But eventually, a late interception sealed it, and the Green Bay Packers won their 4th Super Bowl in franchise history. And with Aaron Rodgers, arguably the most talented quarterback to ever play in his youth, still, the NFL was surely going to succumb to the Packers dynasty, right? Surely. Aaron Charles Rodgers was the most popular player in the NFL. People were looking at Tom Brady and Peyton Manning as fossils, geezers. Rodgers is hot and ready to mingle. Who wants the smoke from the big cheese man? And the answer early on was, well, nobody. Aaron Rodgers actually managed to exceed expectations. People thought he was going to be the best quarterback in the league, but he said, nah, f that, and had the best season a quarterback has ever had. Nobody has been more efficient in a season than 2011 Rodgers, and I don't even think they can be. Like, on a mathematical level, it's not possible, as the Packers went 15-1 and were cruising to another Super Bowl dubski. It's a shame, because the Lions were also pretty good this year. Stafford and Megatron did things, but literally nobody cared because the Packers were just better. Same goes for Brady and Breeze as well. Not Peyton Manning, because he missed the whole season with forehead surgery, but those two had amazing years. New England had a big season highlighted by their new weapons in Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez, who would go on to dominate the NFL for the next decade together. I'm lying, by the way, okay? If you didn't know, he actually ended up Tim Tebow. Tim Tebow. You know, if I could go back in time to the year 2011 and do one thing, I wouldn't warn the world about COVID or some boring shit like that. Nah, I'd say, Denver, please, 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 please keep Tim Tebow, okay? He ends up leaving you for the Jets, and they win 7 Super Bowls, so don't trade him. Just keep him on the team, because in 2011, Tim Tebow honestly just blew ass. Man straight up looked like if the Lions put Dan Skipper at quarterback full-time, but in the body of a muscular man. But he kept winning. I don't know how, but he just won and won and won. And eventually, he dropped 40 on us, dashing our playoff hopes despite having the most penalties in a single season ever, and a certain sad child was not having any of it on that day. Yes, this is me. No, nothing's changed. And he just kept going. Versus the defending AFC champion Steelers in the wild card, Tim Tebow threw a slant to Demaryius Thomas, who ran it all the way for a touchdown. And after the game, the John 3:16 coincidences were a lot, but that was kind of it for Tebow, as immediately Tom and Bill double-teamed him, and that was that. Fuck you, Tebow. Fuck you. Anyways, in NFC land, things were looking different. The 49ers kind of came out of nowhere this season with new head coach Jim Harbaugh, and were one of the best teams in the league, if not the best. They had a disgusting defense, but nobody was really worried about anyone other than Green Bay, who were set to play against the New York Giants, who were only in the playoffs because Jason Garrett iced his own goddamn kicker, and were projected to be slaughtered by a prime Aaron Rodgers, and a Packers team that only lost 1 game in the last 12 months. Well, 2.
They're going for it all. The pass is caught for the touchdown.
They fucking lost. The Packers lost to the Giants. And I didn't even mention it, but the 49ers also barely won 2 versus the Saints after New Orleans' defense collapsed twice in crunch time. And the 49ers escaped with their playoff lives, as well as the last of Drew Brees' functioning testicles, which then, I'm telling you, the 2011 playoffs were weren't real at all. But this setup, my favorite single game performance ever.
Kyle Williams on the punt. This ball sure hit Kyle Williams on the knee. Kyle Williams, who's already muffed one. He grabs this one and he crosses it up.
Kyle Williams fumbled not once, but twice. 2 times. And that was enough to send the worst team in Super Bowl history to the big game, as the New York Giants upset the 49ers. And now we're ready to face Thomas Edward Patrick Brady Jr. and the evil empire. Those who face the... Hold on. Give me a minute. Those who face the Sith must prepare to die. You do not face the empire without losing. Eli Manning has a lot of testosterone in that old pecker of his, I tell you what. And this Super Bowl between the Patriots went just as the last one did, in a historic, unequivocal upset. The Patriots should have really won this game. I mean, they were better, but you know the drill. Wes Welker dropped a huge pass, Brady's wife got pissed at him, or at the time wife, and Eli Manning and Mario Manningham completed a top 10 pass and catch of all time, and somehow, despite having significantly lower odds to win the Super Bowl than the 2-win Colts, Eli Manning and the New York Giants had done it. But could they maintain that success? Of course the fuck not. What? No, if it's not 2011 or 2007, Eli Manning isn't even a player. He's just a concept. But 2012 would be one of the greatest seasons in NFL history, which began in the offseason as in Indianapolis, they moved on from Peyton Manning, drafting Andrew Luck, while the Skins took Robert Griffin III second overall, and the two would go on to have a legendary Rookie of the Year duel, while Peyton Manning went to Denver and teamed up with all the weapons they had over there, which also meant, like I said, Tim Tebow went to the Jets, and with Mark Sanchez still there, it obviously went great. The Jets became a dynasty. Also, just a little shout out here, the Bucs drafted Doug Martin, who quietly had one of the best rookie running back seasons of all time, and possibly the greatest nickname ever, the Muscle Hamster. But his career would be plagued by injuries, and honestly, I kind of just feel bad, because I don't really talk about Tampa in this video until later. NFC land remained pretty similar though. The 49ers were the best team in football, now dethroning Green Bay with solid production from Alex Smith and a defense that was a cheat code in Madden 12, but they weren't alone anymore, even in their division, as out of nowhere, the Seattle Seahawks became a real threat. They were still young, so maybe not quite yet, but for a team that already had a young defense with Cam Chancellor and Earl Thomas, their timeline was injected with crack when Russell Wilson joined the team, and along with their big hitters, Seattle had almost arrived and achieved greatness. And Russ also randomly joined the Offensive Rookie of the Year race too, with Seattle beating the Patriots, Packers on a completely normal and very safe call, the 49ers, and handed the Cardinals a 60 whopper almost, the third biggest blowout in modern history. But the NFC was really just stacked too. The Packers, Niners, Seahawks, and Vikings also had Adrian Peterson having one of the best running back seasons ever. Minnesota wasn't a real contender, but still, the number 1 seed in the NFC wasn't any of those teams. It was the Falcons, who, led by Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Roddy White, Tony Gonzalez. Oh, dude, I love this team. They just scored so many points, and the NFC would have even been more loaded, but the Saints were kind of deleted from the league this year because of Sean Payton's shenanigans with Bountygate and potentially stealing Vicodin and getting the DEA involved. So, you know, that happened. Sorry, Drew Brees. You just thug it out for another year. And the Giants also didn't even make the playoffs either. So now it was playoff time. And the wild card was boring. The only thing notable was RG3's injury, which ended his career basically. So that's pretty much it for Washington for this decade. But the divisional round, it did go hard. The Ravens completed the Mile High Miracle, and getting domed by a stripper, Jacoby Jones, was a man possessed, rest in peace, as he ended up getting behind the defense for a touchdown. And the Ravens knocked out Peyton Manning's Broncos, while Aaron Rodgers' poop fetish started versus the 49ers as Colin Kaepernick absolutely obliterated them on the ground, setting QB rushing records all over the place. And after the Falcons blew a lead, can you believe that? In the championship game, the 49ers made the Super Bowl and played against the Ravens? They had like a geriatric Ray Lewis whose body could only get out of bed because of buprenorphine, and Ray Rice. Look, this Ravens team wasn't very good. I mean, they were good, but they weren't like a perennial Super Bowl contender all year. The 49ers were pretty much better at every position, but Baltimore was demolishing them. Jacoby Jones was just on a mission this postseason, and the Ravens looked to be walking to a Super Bowl victory, and then, well, the lights went out, which for a brief moment looked like it would change everything, but the Ravens barely hung on. And Ray Lewis retired following the Super Bowl as the Joe Flacco era had begun and would reign over the NFL for the next 30 years. Well, that didn't last long, huh? Yeah, in just week 1. Peyton Manning clobbered the Ravens with 7 of them things. And the Ravens kind of won't be mentioned until he comes along. But in the meantime, let's talk about some bad football teams. The Cleveland Browns. Everything was going great for them. They won a franchise best 4 games in 2013 and traded away Trent Richardson, who was good for like 3/4 of a year as a running back, but at least they had a superstar in the making in Josh Gordon, whose long, illustrious career will also define this video, of course. Besides that, you get the deal. The 49ers were good, the Patriots were good, but the Seahawks were born. After flashing their potential last year, the Legion of Boom came onto the scene and became one of the single best defenses of all time. Richard Sherman, Bam Bam Cam, Bobby Wagner, Earl Thomas, they were straight up strangling their prey to death every week. And the offense also had Russell Wilson beast mode, Doug Baldwin. I mean, this team became potentially the team to beat in a still absolutely loaded NFC, which had other Tier 2 teams like Chip Kelly's Eagles and Cam Newton and the Carolina Panthers. But the Cheese Man would also not make an appearance this season from what it looked like, as Rodgers was out for 7 games with a broken collarbone. But then he returned in the final game of the season, playing for a playoff spot versus the Chicago Bears. He legally was required to attend this event to fulfill his ownership contractual obligations, and Bears fans just look away.
Rodgers gets out, floats it, Cobb, touchdown, Randall Cobb!
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers does not like the Bears. Now, to talk more about the AFC, the Denver Broncos looked like one of the best teams of all time as well. Peyton Manning broke every record for single-season passing yards, passing touchdowns. The brother was showing no mercy. And this was all with a defense that should have been even better than they already were with Pro Bowler Elvis Dumervil. But, the fax machine broke, so they lost him, as you do. But the AFC West over the last few years, too, went from being trash to loaded. The Broncos were a thing, like I've been saying. The Chargers had prime Keenan Allen and Phillip Rivers. The Chiefs had Alex Smith and Jamal Charles. And we had Jameis Olawale and won 4 games. But yeah, once again, this might be the strongest level of competition in NFL history, or at least recent history. I mean, the Patriots were like damn near a Tier 2 contender, and they went 12-4, only getting somewhat sidetracked by the Aaron Hernandez situation, but the playoffs began with a bang. The Colts and Andrew Luck versus the Chiefs. A game in which Kansas City, who was a poverty franchise, blew a 38-10 lead as Andrew Luck had one of the greatest comebacks in NFL history and looked to birth a legendary career. And meanwhile, the 49ers beat the Packers, again, on a walk-off field goal, which led to the championship games, being the Broncos versus the Patriots, and another installment of the Brady-Manning rivalry in the Seahawks versus the 49ers. One of these games was mid, but the other was one of the best games ever played. Yeah, it wasn't the Manning versus Brady game, as Denver pretty much crushed them, but the NFC West rivalry game was everything people could have dreamed it was and more. Blood, guts, and glory covered the field. Just revisiting the game highlights alone, I completely forgot how violent this game was. Navarro Bowman had one of the most disgusting injuries ever, and the 49ers still should have won. They had their chances, but in the biggest moments, the biggest players made plays. And, well, the 49ers tried Richard Sherman with a sorry receiver like Crabtree. And, quite frankly, that's the results you're going to get. Super Bowl 48. Yeah, it sucked. But for a season as great as this one, I guess we kind of had to get one of the worst Super Bowls ever, because you got to offset things at some point. The best defense versus the best offense was a complete dud, as Seattle dismantled Denver, as Russell Wilson was a Super Bowl champion in year number 2, as the Seahawks were not going to be showing any signs of slowing down soon. Alright, now we're getting into some classic NFL chicanery. Ray Rice was kicked out of the NFL for beating his fiancée, which, you know, of course. And then another world-renowned piece of shit in Kellen Winslow Jr. was arrested for masturbating in his car, but it's fine. He told the police he was just looking for a Boston market, so surely he was let go, right? And then Ndamukong Suh also just kept on stepping on Aaron Rodgers, and there were so many more players arrested this year. But luckily, the NFL was cleansed by its most level-headed, mature player it's seen in decades when the Browns brought in Billy Vegas, Johnny Money Manziel himself, the greatest player to ever walk this earth. And, you know, time for my every 10-minute random rant on a nostalgic fantasy player for me, but Matt Forte was a beast this season. The Bears were really bad, but the man put the team on his back, Greg Jennings style, and casually had 2K scrimmage yards, which is wild. But back to the contenders. So at this point, people thought the Patriots dynasty was over, and Tom Brady was cooked. In 2014, 11 years ago, people were giving up on Tom and said he should retire and go start playing shuffleboarding or whatever, as despite adding All-Pro Darrelle Revis, the Patriots were struggling to start the year, getting blown out by Kansas City, with Tom even getting benched. But, you know, major spoiler here, the dynasty did not end there. Meanwhile, in 49ers land, they had completely fallen apart. The front office turned on Jim Harbaugh, and he was effectively backstabbed and forced out of the building, which would lead to an even worse 2015 campaign without him. So, with no 49ers in the picture, the Seahawks and Packers took advantage, but also the Dallas Cowboys were a real team as well. DeMarco Murray was arguably the best running back in football, and Tony Romo and Dez Bryant were playing good ball. Also, I'm going to mention Odell's catch here now because, well, the Giants sucked. The AFC North was also evolving fast as well. The Steelers got a power up with Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell now both in their primes. The Ravens had T-Sizzle, Steve Smith, and Joe Flacco, of course, and the Bengals were almost in contention with the big dogs as well. But honestly, although this was a pretty mid-regular season, all things considered, we ended up getting one of the greatest playoffs of all time. But what made these playoffs so insane and unique was the controversies. Because literally every single round, from the wild card to the Super Bowl, had something to make Twitter pop the fuck off. So it all started with Detroit. Doesn't it always? And because Roger and the deity that runs the universe itself hates Detroit, the Lions got cocked by this Brandon Pettigrew no-call and lost to the Cowboys. But then, karma got Dallas in the divisional round as they lost to the Packers after Dez Bryant's catch was ruled incomplete. And then, in the championship round, Andrew Luck and the Colts fell to Tom Brady, with the Deflategate controversy being the biggest media nightmare the NFL has probably ever had, as the world was convinced the Patriots cheated and Tom Brady would be suspended 4 games as a result. But also, the NFC Championship between the Seahawks and Packers was... I'm running out of synonyms here, bro. Nutty as a fruitcake. The Packers had so many chances to put this game away, but couldn't. And when you leave the door open for a champion, that's usually objectively not smart, as the Packers fucked up an onside kick recovery, and Jermaine Kearse called game, which then led to the best game in NFL history. Maybe not my personal favorite, but the best game ever played. Patriots versus Seahawks. The game that would determine the next 5 years of football. Would a dynasty end today and would a new one blossom, or would the evil empire maintain its grasp on winning in general? And well, It was back and forth. These teams were evenly matched. That was abundantly clear, but Brady and the Patriots offense was just too good. They were dicing up the Seahawks, but still, Seattle had a chance to go win the game themselves, and that's exactly what they did.
Russell in the pocket. Russell for Curse, and it's broken up again. Is it? But somehow, did he wind up with a football?
One of the greatest plays in NFL history. The Patriots got historically unlucky, and with Marshawn Lynch bringing the ball down to within mere inches, the next move was obvious. It's Ricardo Lockett time, bitches. Woo!
Pass is intercepted at the goal line by Malcolm Butler.
Well, there you go. One of the most iconic plays in NFL history happened. Malcolm Butler, a no-name defensive back at the time, called game. The Seahawks fell off a cliff, and Tom Brady still had a lot more in the tank. All right, it's honestly going to be kind of impossible to top the run we've been on for the last couple seasons, right? I mean, come on. That's like 3 elite seasons in a row, but 2015 did have its moments, though. The Jets, the New York Jets, were good. Out of absolutely fuck all nowhere, Ryan Fitzpatrick, the journeyman sensation, had Jets fans fooled into thinking they were looking at their franchise quarterback now. But with Brandon Marshall, the Jets were actually a threat, sneaking into the playoffs, beating the Patriots on a weird defer call in overtime, and they were sort of a threat. And speaking of the Patriots, yeah, Tom lost some of that sexual appeal, and they kind of collapsed a little bit down the stretch, which allowed the Denver Broncos to come out of kind of nowhere as well, led by Brock Osweiler for most of the season, to steal the #1 seed in the AFC. Because for Denver at this point, Peyton Manning was absolutely geeked, but their defense was nearing all-time levels, with Von Miller being a man possessed. So they just had to see how far they could go. But the main storyline of this year wasn't Brady, Rodgers, Manning, or Breeze. It was Cam Newton and the Carolina Panthers, a team that nobody ever really cares about, but holy smokes, they were good this year. This was a team that didn't really have all that much talent on offense on paper, but Cam Newton just made it all work. With Greg Olsen as his leading receiver, who was a tight end, Cam took over the world basically, with, dabbing being a thing, and this was also a team that was on the other side of the ball, elite, led by the best defensive player in the league in Luke Kuechly, as they became the second team this decade to go 15-1. The goofy headlines also were, a thing as usual. I gotta mention a few. Cowboys rookie tackle Lael Collins had an unfortunate media headline leak about a well-mannered individual by the name of Throatzilla, who got upset for not receiving a payment for eating his ass. All right, sounds about right. The Richard Rodgers Hail Mary happened to the Lions, who had Jim Bob Cooter as their offensive coordinator, who I love this guy. He is known for his NFL achievements, such as climbing through a girl's window to get in bed with her. I could not tell you how this man is employed. I could keep going, too. The Ravens had a D-tackle arrested for illegal possession of an alligator, and we also got the greatest tweet of all time from Bills legend Cardale Jones. But, alright, I'll chill. Let's go back to football. The Bengals were good, too, for a hot minute. Then Andy Dalton got hurt, so that ended that. But in the playoffs, that didn't stop them from having a truly Bengals versus Steelers game in the wild card. These playoffs were drunk, bro. I don't know what was going on, but the Bengals had the game won. Free and easy. Handed to them in a paper bag, but they decided to piss on it and got arrested for public indecency. Adam Jones and Vontaze Burfict lost their craniums. After giving Antonio Brown a physical lobotomy, they decided to get double penalties, and a chip shot field goal later would eliminate the Bengals from the playoffs. And then we got Seahawks versus Vikings. Another somewhat similar situation sort of happened, where in one of the coldest games ever played, Teddy Bridgewater suffered a pretty horrible injury, but a chip shot field goal would seal Seahawks.
And the kick is no good!
I mean, that's just gotta be the worst missed field goal we've seen in a fat minute. Like, really? Give me a few tries and I'm accidentally getting that John in there, alright? Now, we gotta talk Arizona Cardinals here for a second, because While Cam Newton was never not going to win the MVP, Carson Palmer had a strong case this season as he finished second and Larry Fitzgerald was still going. The Honey Badger was debatably the best safety in football, and this all led to Cardinals versus Packers. My favorite game ever. It's just so good. Aaron Rodgers with no one else versus the entire Cardinals team. Like, the Packers' top 2 receivers by the end of this game were Jeff Janis and Jared Abbrederis. But still, the Packers battled. But now they needed a miracle to happen. It was 4th down and long, and a conversion needed to happen to even stay in this game. But come on now. They got Aaron motherfucking Rodgers. So that's easy. Give me something harder. All right, now, we're in damn near the same exact situation. Can Rodgers somehow get it to the end zone, and exactly the end zone, to drag the game on just a little longer?
And Janis, does he
Stop it!
Oh, please!
What a catch!
That's insane!
It was just absurd. How can anyone do this? And Aaron Rodgers has done something like this multiple times. Yeah. And then, in overtime, the Cardinals had the ball, and it was their turn to make magic happen. And Larry Fitzgerald almost iced it on a broken play, and then a shovel pass truly ended it. And the Cardinals moved on to the championship game and got promptly railed by the Panthers. Then in the AFC Championship game, we got Manning versus Brady again, which came down to the last play, a failed 2-point conversion, and once again, the stage was set. Broncos versus Panthers in the Super Bowl. The old Peyton Manning versus the young Cam Newton. And the game was honestly not that good, but it was defined by 2 players, Cam Newton and Von Miller, and the utter destruction Denver's defense left on the Panthers. Because Carolina's defense did their job, it's just Cam Newton could not figure anything out that day. And the defined play of the game came when Cam Newton chose to not jump on a key fumble, and Denver won the Super Bowl, with Peyton Manning capturing his 2nd chip and retiring on top, meaning the NFL was pretty much wide open again. Or was it? I mean, was the NFL ever open when this stud existed? Because the Patriots didn't go anywhere. But the NFL looked to take a bit of a step back in terms of actual great teams, because the Panthers were pretty bad all of a sudden. The Seahawks hadn't mentally recovered from their Tom beating, with the Cardinals being right down there with them, as both of them would have one of the weirdest, worst, best games ever in a 6-6 mid-off. But there was one young team that kind of took over all the media headlines this year.
It's Elliott! Elliott for the touchdown!
The Dallas Cowboys were the most electric team in the league in 2016. Fueled by the rookie duo of this random-ass Ewok and Dakota Prescott, the Cowboys went 13-3 and were elite. And meanwhile, holy 2016, man. David Johnson and Jay Ajayi were 2 of the top fantasy running backs in the league. And David Johnson truly had a legendary year for the Cardinals, but no wins really came from that. And then the AFC West was back once again. The Chargers and Broncos lagged behind, but the Chiefs were amazing this year, with Travis Kelce, Eric Berry, Alex Smith, and a young rookie by the name of Tyreek Hill. They were seemingly set to explode on any given play, and the Raiders. The Raiders, man. I'm gonna make a full video on the season soon enough, but fuck, bro. Fuck! But the best team in football in 2016 was the Atlanta Falcons. Similar to their team from earlier, it was still Matt Ryan and Julio Jones calling the shots, but also, once again, they had some names from 2016. Vic Beasley, a linebacker, decided to be really good for 1 year, and that's it, and Devontae Freeman. Who remembers prime Devontae Freeman? I totally forgot about him, but yeah, the Falcons were legit. And in the playoffs, yeah, I'm gonna be honest, the playoffs weren't all that. The wild card had 4 blowouts, with the Packers taking down the Giants, who were rejuvenated with an elite OBJ and a defense led by Landon Collins. That's another 2016 name, but they took a nice little boat trip, and that was that. The divisional round was also kind of more the same, except I'm telling you, Aaron Rodgers was a one-man entertainment show in the 2010s, and versus Dallas, he did the impossible again. After a close back and forth and a comeback, the game was tied at 31 apiece. Packers needing a field goal to take down Dallas. And with 35 seconds left, it wasn't looking super possible, but it's Aaron Rodgers. What are you gonna do versus this monster?
Comes underneath, and the pass is incomplete, out of bounds. Now they say complete.
Rodgers to Cook, Crosby field goal. Cowboys lose. You love to see it. But Dallas did at least get to see Rodgers get pounded a week later by the Falcons, so there's that. And while this was going on, the Patriots handled Big Ben, which led to the Super Bowl. Falcons versus Patriots. Remember when Chris Jones' dick fell out? Anyone remember that? That was great stuff, as he absolutely revolutionized the tactical dive after the 40-yard dash, and the combine hasn't been the same since.
I'm looking at the 40, and all of a sudden I feel it. I feel it touch my leg, and I'm like, oh, shit. So I try to cut.
The 2017 season began with David Johnson going down with a season-ending injury, cementing himself as quite possibly the greatest fantasy bust ever, being the consensus first overall pick. Good to have him on the squad that year. But the biggest storylines from this season were two teams, the Eagles and the Browns, for obviously the exact same reasons. The Cleveland Browns were a f***ing dumpster fire. I know, stay with me here. Somehow, in 2 seasons on the job, Hugh Jackson went 1-31 and kept his job, including the 2017 campaign where the Browns went 0-16. Amazing work. That is so difficult to do in the modern era. This season was such an absolute disaster that they almost traded everything for AJ McCarron, a garbage backup, and looked into hiring the former Secretary of State because reasons, even though she had zero football background whatsoever. I genuinely can't believe that was a news headline. But the Eagles, behind sophomore quarterback Carson Wentz, turned into a powerhouse, and that's what the 2017 season was all about. Young teams coming out of nowhere and shocking everyone. Wentz and the Eagles were great. Jared Goff and the Rams had arrived. Deshaun Watson and the Texans were popping off until, Carson Wentz and Deshaun Watson both had their seasons ended. But the Rams kept going, I guess. Todd Gurley was a demon, and it's now time to talk about a certain team for the first time all video. The Jacksonville Jaguars. Welcome to the video, Jacksonville. Glad to have you. I don't know if you can believe it or not, though, but the Jaguars didn't do anything for the entirety of the 2010s to this point. But in 2017, Saxonville was born. And behind Jalen Ramsey and Calais Campbell, they had the best defense in football. And murmurings of a potential deep playoff run had begun. Also, I don't think I've mentioned the Dolphins outside of Jay Ajayi, so this is a good time to mention the time Coach Forster was caught on video talking to his stripper girlfriend he impregnated while taking lines of coke, and for some reason his wife wasn't a fan of that. I couldn't tell you why. So yeah, those were the contenders now, outside of 2 teams, not the Packers because Rodgers was hurt again, but the Patriots, as usual, the Saints led by Michael Thomas and Drew Brees, but also the Steelers. The Killer Bees were arguably at their peak now and going blow for blow with the Patriots this year, which led to a Steelers versus Patriots regular season game that would be instrumental in deciding who would basically make the Super Bowl for home field advantage. And
after reviewing the play, the receiver in the end zone did not survive the ground. It's an incomplete pass.
What is this fucking debauchery?
Okay, fine, that was bullshit, but there's still a chance to. Why aren't you going for the field goal? Why is this play completely broken? Oh my fucking god, what the fucking fuck?
Yeah, the Raiders also completely regressed with Derek Carr not looking like his old self, but we did get the classic Raiders vs. Chiefs Thursday game, which was one of my favorite games that I've been to in the rain, where multiple flags happened, but Crabtree still called game. Besides that, though, other headlines around the league were the rise of the Chiefs, with Alex Smith having a filthy season, only throwing 5 picks all year to 26 touchdowns. And with Kelsey, Hunt, and Hill, they were lethal. The Vikings were good, too, out of nowhere, with Case Keenum, Stephon Diggs, Harrison Smith, and, holy lord, Xavier Rhodes. What a name. Andrew Luck also missed the whole season because the Colts thought he just had a little owie instead of a career-threatening injury, and the Bengals eliminated the Ravens from the playoffs on a last-second touchdown, meaning the Buffalo Bills clinched a playoff spot for the first time since 1999. The wild card, though, wasn't amazing, but we got Titans vs. Chiefs, which, again, the Chiefs blew another lead. This one being a 21-3 lead late in the third to Marcus Mariota and the Titans, as Mariota caught a pass from himself, and the Titans inadvertently spawned a deity so powerful, NFL history would never be the same again, as Alex Smith wouldn't ever play for the Kansas City Chiefs again. The divisional round, though, was pretty hype. The Eagles barely outlasted the defending NFC champs on a last-second play. The Jaguars shocked the world, and after managing just 10 points last week versus Buffalo, they dropped 45 on the Steelers. 45 points, and ended the Killer Bee era. Blake Bortles was just that good, and the Steelers haven't been the same organization since that game, honestly, but the one game that stole the show was Vikings vs. Saints. Drew Brees had his best shot at a Super Bowl since probably 2009 when they won it, and the Eagles were vulnerable. So if they won this game, they could have gotten to the Super Bowl pretty easily, and Brees was playing some of his best football as well, and he did it. He got the Saints a lead with 20 seconds left. Michael Thomas was still unguardable, and then the football god stepped in and grabbed Drew Brees by the spine and snapped him in half because, of course he can't be happy. How does this even happen?
Diggs! Sideline! Touchdown!
Sweet Moses, man. It never won't be amusing. Whoa, what a call from Joe Buck, too. A voice crack and all, it's just peak cinema. So now, we were getting dangerously close to a Blake Bortles, Case Keenum Super Bowl, but luckily, Tom Brady, one hand and all, was semi-chubbed and wasn't letting that happen, as the Patriots, aided by a controversial call, came back, down double digits, again, and then Nick Foles obliterated the Vikings, which set up Eagles versus Patriots. The Eagles were just the definition of an underdog. Now, I've talked about this game extensively on my Eagles video a few weeks back, on my 2017 video, so I'm sure you get it at this point, but I still can't overstate how impressive it was that Tom Brady didn't choke. Tom played out of his mind, but it still wasn't enough to beat a team that wasn't favored in a single postseason game all playoffs, as a Philly special and a Tom Brady drop and strip sack later made the Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl champions, and Nicholas Foles raised the Lombardi as a Super Bowl MVP. But Tom wasn't done just yet. The Pittsburgh Steelers, the finest organization on the planet. The standard is the standard, motherfuckers. They just lost it. Le'Veon Bell took to social media to let his frustrations be known, which is always a positive thing. He was at a strip club every other night, became another huge fantasy bust, and released a few rap songs, which, honestly, compared to his comrade, made it seem like he was dropping To Pimp a Butterfly every week.
But it is the right decision for me.
Yeah, by the way, Antonio Brown wasn't in complete Chernobyl meltdown mode yet, but he was showing signs as he disappeared before their last game versus the Bengals, and the Steelers even lost to the Raiders and missed the playoffs. Good times, man. I missed that baseball field. But remember when I was talking about Alex Smith? Well, not anymore. Patrick LeVon Mahomes was the quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs now, and the balance of time itself was completely thrown off. Right out of the gate, he started doing things we've never seen before and may never see again. 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns in his first season as the starter. And what's even crazier, somehow, Drew Brees at 40 was right there with him. The Saints had their best team of the decade. Their defense was filthy. Kamara was balling. Brees was in the zone, and he was basically the most efficient volume passer not named Patrick Mahomes, as the Saints were pretty much the best team in football. So I'm very excited to see the Saints win the Super Bowl. In their division, though, not much was really going on. The Panthers have been irrelevant for a few years, but Jameis Winston, the Buccaneers quarterback who I have yet to discuss, had one of the most entertaining seasons of all time, throwing for 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions. He was just Literally a fantasy cheat code. He was so fun to watch every single Sunday, and the season ended off on the most perfect note with a pick 6, ending the Bucs season. But what was going on in the AFC? Well, the Raiders decided to bring back Chucky. Mr. Gruden was the head coach now, and he immediately traded away Khalil Mack, so fucking awesome. And what made it even better to be a Raider fan during this time was the Chiefs were so fun, man. They would have been even better too, but Kareem Hunt decided to do the thing that NFL players tend to do, and they also had that iconic game versus the Rams, so I was really just having a good year. So meanwhile, with the Chiefs doing their thing, I think they sacrificed Alex Smith's career for their success. But the Patriots also looked pretty weak this season. They got demolished by the Titans earlier in the year and were just overshadowed by Kansas City completely. I mean, but everyone was. The Chargers were solid with Melvin Gordon in his prime. The Seahawks were pretty good again, finally. Hell, Mr. Unlimited probably would have gotten MVP looks, but Mahomes, so nah. All that was left, though, was for the pieces to fall where they may and see what happens in the playoffs. Well, Bears fans, what's up? How you doing? I didn't feel like talking about you guys for reasons, but yeah, when I said the Raiders traded Khalil Mack, Chicago got him and had one of the best defenses of the modern era.
Oh, he hits the upright again! That's impossible!
Oh man, I love my job. So the Bears were out. Lamar got bounced as well, and the divisional round was pretty routine as the championship games were when things would get spicy. Saints versus Rams. The old versus the new. Sean McVay had brought the Rams back from a decade of irrelevancy, but they were hampered by a Todd Gurley injury, and with Drew Brees being as hungry as he was with arguably his best team, it seemed like the Saints had a Super Bowl appearance locked up. But the more interesting game was Chiefs versus Patriots. Since the game was in Arrowhead, it seemed like an obvious moment for the Chiefs to end the Patriots dynasty and take the mantle as the new kings of the NFL, but both of those things did not happen. The worst call in the history of sports finally sent Drew Brees into the twisting nether forever, and the Chiefs almost won off of a game-ending pick, but it got called back, and a run-in touchdown ended the game. The Patriots did the impossible and made another Super Bowl, holding off the Chiefs' reign for just one more year, and versus the injured Rams, the Patriots just kind of had to do the bare minimum, which they did. And the New England Patriots won another Super Bowl. And Tom Brady, at the age of 41, had 6 pieces of hardware. All right, here we are. The final season of the 2010s decade. And was it the best? Well, it didn't start out on a positive note, with Andrew Luck calling it a career, which was sad, but then it got so much worse. Antonio Brown became a Raider. He got in a hot air balloon, he froze his feet, called out our GM, and was promptly cut. So that was just such a fun time to... Sorry, just kind of had an existential crisis there, but the 2019 season would be defined by one man, Lamar Jackson. He was... Let me just say it's crazy that this was 6 years ago at this point, but Lamar's 2019 year was special. The league hadn't seen someone like him since prime Michael Vick, and the Ravens were the best team in football, but slightly behind Baltimore was the Chiefs, of course, but Josh Allen in Buffalo, too, was starting to make some noise. And although the Patriots were still a threat with an elite defense, they were going through a tumultuous time. For the first time this decade, Rob Gronkowski was gone, and this lack of offensive talent made them take desperate measures. They signed Antonio Brown! Oh my god. And you know what's crazy about this? It could have worked. I mean, it worked with Brady in Tampa later, but AB was truly in a headspace at the time, and they cut him immediately after signing him. And add on Robert Kraft enjoying a handy off the job, and a late season loss to Ryan Fitzpatrick, the Patriots were a walking clown show and were forced to play in the dreaded wild card. The Cleveland Browns also went all in on the season, bringing in Odell Beckham, which led to Baker regressing, and the Browns missed the playoffs entirely. The 49ers and Packers were also back, as San Francisco had a filthy defense, and Aaron Rodgers with Devontae Adams were just breaking records all over the place, only to be eclipsed by Michael Thomas, who was having the second best wide receiver season in modern NFL history in New Orleans. But like I said, the Patriots were playing in the wild card and had to face off against the king, Derrick Henry, and the Tennessee Titans, who were the Patriots' kryptonite in this game, basically, as Henry was literally untackleable, and a pick six ended the Patriots dynasty forever. Besides that, the Texans played Buffalo in a pretty fun game with Josh Allen being a bit goofy, but the divisional round is when things got insane again. The Baltimore Ravens, statistically, were the best team of possibly the entire 2010s decade, but Derrick Henry didn't care, as Tennessee completely blew them out. Lamar struggled versus their defense, and the Titans moved on to the AFC Championship game to play the Chiefs, who just came back to beat the Texans in one quarter and looked unbeatable. Meanwhile, the NFC Championship game would be the 49ers and Packers. Aaron Rodgers versus the Niners again. So of course, he got gutted, with Raheem Mostert ending the game in the first half, as the Chiefs just also out-talented the Titans, leading to the 49ers and the Chiefs. Part 1. These two teams look to be the future of the league. Young versus young. Prime versus prime. And Kyle Shanahan held a big lead late in the game, but they f***ing choked again. Jet Chip Wasp changed the game. Damian Williams, of all people, took over and was robbed of a Super Bowl MVP, but the 49ers did not have enough firepower. And for some foreshadowing for the 2020s, the Kansas City Chiefs were Super Bowl champions and finally won their franchise's first ever Super Bowl, once and for all, taking the dynasty mantle away from the Patriots, becoming the team to beat for the next 10 years. So alright, that's the video there. I thought it would be kind of fun to try a new style, so let me know what you think, because I would totally be down to do more non-specific videos like that. But if you like this video, then subscribe, because I got a lot of videos on the channel just like this one. And if you did like this video, I think you'd really like this video I did a few weeks back on the Philadelphia Eagles. It's pretty good, trust me. And thanks to all my Patreons for pledging $1. It truly does mean a lot. But anyways, until next time.